الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي عمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And welcome to today's webinar. What we've done is that we have held 10 sessions across the country. So we've held 10 sessions um, around the country that where we've launched our toolkit. And so today we are going to just run the exact same session, but we're going to run this session just for those people who were unable to attend the previous sessions. So we held sessions in London, in Crawley, Birmingham, Leicester, Manchester, Sheffield, and Leeds. And so this is an online session for those people who are unable to attend those particular sessions. So today we are going to cover the launch of our toolkit, and I will focus you on key aspects of the toolkit to navigate how to make changes in schools. So Muslim Family Initiative, it was set up initially in 2008. We were called SRE Islamic before this, and now we changed last year to Muslim Family Initiative, and we've been launching these toolkits. These are the first of 11 toolkits that we'll be launching over the next 2 years that focus on the ability of parents to counteract some of the major challenges that we're facing, major parenting challenges we've been facing in raising our children. So this toolkit was created in order to support parents to meet some of these challenges. So the toolkit covers, and I will, I'm just going to change my view so that you are able then to look at the toolkit as well. So I'm just going to share the screen properly, so you'll be able to view the toolkit. So the toolkit is about 3 or 4 months worth of work that we put in. We created toolkits in the past to support parents to challenge RSE in schools. But this one we have made very comprehensive. So it's quite a long toolkit, but it enables you to achieve a whole host of different objectives in relation to school. So there is a key knowledge section which helps you to understand aspects of what should be taught in schools. So it talks about the statutory guidance, the RSE guidance, the old guidance, and the new guidance that's just been recently released. And it also includes within that guidance aspects of what needs to be taught in schools at primary level and secondary level. So that's the contents, the toolkit contents. But we've also created a navigation contents. Now, this contents enables you to access key information that you want to access as a parent of a child in primary school or in a secondary school. Or if you're a Muslim teacher working in a state school, or a Muslim governor, or an imam that's supporting parents to challenge some of these issues in schools. Now, this toolkit, alhamdulillah, has been supported by a whole host of different scholars, so Sheikh Haytham al-Haddad, Sheikh Asrar Rashid, Sheikh Bilal Brown, Sheikh Zahir Mahmoud, Sheikh Abdul Hakbuli, and Sheikh Abdul Qayyum, Mufti Abdul Rahman bin Yusuf Mangera, amongst others. So they've kindly endorsed it and supported and encouraged parents to engage in schools. So we've talked about the toolkit contents and navigation contents. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the statutory guidance, because the statutory guidance was first initially written in 2019. And I'll just navigate to the actual toolkit. So initially it was written in 2019, just before RSE was made statutory, which was implemented in schools in 2020. Now, the guidance covers key aspects of what schools must be doing, and schools must follow the guidance unless there's a reason why they're not following it, and they've got to publish that reason, and they will explain the rationale behind why they're not following the guidance. But firstly, we want to just talk about a few things that we've looked at, the new guidance. This is 2026 guidance. This guidance will be need to be implemented by schools by September 2026. But schools are going to be working towards this over the next year. So I just want to direct you to certain quotes. Now, you can use these quotes when you are interacting with schools, and you can use these quotes to remind schools of what they need to implement. So, for example, the RSE guidance states that RSHE, which is relationship, sex, and health education, should be sensitive to the religious background of pupils. Now, if you speak to most schools and ask them the question, how are you taking into account the religious background of my child? Most schools will say, why do I need to? But it's helpful to try and remind schools that they have to. So they need to be sensitive to the religious background of pupils. What that means is that there'll be lots of different schools around the country. Some schools will have different proportions of children, some which have religious background children in the school. Other schools will not have religious background pupils in their schools. Now, lots of schools will be using a one size fits all approach to how they cover this subject. We need to remind schools that they need to take into account the religious background of pupils. And so they need to be sensitive to the fact that there are pupils from religious backgrounds, and what they are sensitive to, other schools may not be sensitive to, and it's all dependent upon the way a school is constituted in terms of the cohort of children at that school. Also, the guidance says that schools must proactively engage and consult parents when they develop and review their RSE policy. We're going to be talking about this a little later, but the policy is a key document that a school must create, and this policy then shapes how a school must teach the subject. So a policy will include things like, typically it will include things like how a school teaches the subject, what resources a school uses, what guidance is there for teachers in defining how they should answer questions that children ask. There should be things such as whether a school teaches sex education classes or not, and how parents can withdraw from those classes. It would include things like how parents are consulted in the school as well, and a whole host of different subjects. So really, you can look at the RSE policy of a school and understand what RSE delivery looks like in that school. But the problem is most policies in a school do not tell you much about what a school is teaching. So we're going to talk about that a little later, but just bear in mind that schools must come back to you before the RSE policy is being reviewed. Now, one thing to note before we go on to the next element is that over the next year, all schools in the country will be reviewing their RSE policies. That is because there's a new guidance. And the new guidance means that schools have to make changes to their policies because some of the aspects of the guidance requires changes to the RSE guidance because there's changes to the national picture. And so over the next year, all schools will be reviewing the RSE policy. Before they review the RSE policy, before they finalize it, they have to consult with you. Now, we're going to talk a bit about this later when we talk about actions, but just bear in mind that there's a legal requirement for schools to consult parents, and we know that most schools do not consult parents, or they do it in a very nominal way. But schools need to go a bit further in proactively engaging and consulting parents. Now, also schools need to ensure that their teaching is age appropriate, although this isn't defined. But what it means is that we can challenge schools and say what we think is age appropriate or not. And I think what we should really be doing with schools is saying, we know our children better than you do, and so we don't think this is age appropriate for our children. And so to argue the case of what age appropriate is, dependent upon what we perceive to be age appropriate. Also, resources must be age appropriate, including the external resources that are used must be age and stage appropriate and unbiased. So they can't push certain types of relationships, LGBTQ relationships over others, for example. It needs to be unbiased, very neutral, and fact-based. So parents can view all RSE materials, and this is really important because in the past, parents have requested to view the RSE resources, and sometimes schools have said to parents, no, we can't we can't show you the RSE resources. And so the new guidance very clearly states that parents can view all RSE materials at the school. So not only does it say that you can view the RSE materials when the school invites you in for a meeting, but it also says that if you're unable to attend a meeting that the school organizes because maybe you're at work, for example, or you can't attend for another reason, the schools then must provide copies for parents to take home. So either there's a parent portal that school has, which houses all the resources, which I don't think schools are going to be able to do. It's very difficult for them to put them on a portal, but the guidance states that you can go to a school and say, look, I want copies of all the materials that you're going to show my children to take home to review and then feed back on. And so schools then have to give you a copy of the resources to view. The only thing that the school can stipulate is that you can't share these resources with someone else because of copyright law. And that's reasonable. And then you can then say, okay, we won't share this, or you can sign a waiver to say that, or an agreement to say, I will not share this with other people, but you can view all the resources. That's really important. And if schools are stopping you from looking at the resources, then we can help you to challenge that. There's also the right to withdraw. Now, at this stage, it's really important to note that this right to withdraw has always existed in law, that you've got the right to withdraw your children from primary school sex education, because primary school sex education is not statutory. First of all, schools may choose not to teach sex education classes. If they decide not to teach sex education classes in the primary school, there is no right to withdraw. If they do teach sex education classes in the primary school, then you've got the right to withdraw from them. Typically, they will teach them in year 5 or year 6, but the policy should state when they're teaching it. If they are teaching it, when they're teaching it, but you've got the right to withdraw. Even in a secondary school, you've got the right to withdraw from the sex education element of RSE until your child turns 15. When your child turns 15, then your child will have the right to decide whether they're opted in or whether they continue to be withdrawn. Now, going on to the next thing, we just want to very briefly cover the differences between the old guidance and the new guidance. At the end of this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, which I'll take at the end. But just for this recording, we won't take questions until the end. So note down any questions you have, and then we'll take them at the end of this session. Now, the old guidance was written in 2019. The new guidance is in 2026. One thing that between the old guidance and new guidance, the previous government suggested that there should be a minimum age at which sex education could not be taught. So they said that children should not be taught sex education classes below the age of 9. And this new government, when it came in, it reviewed the draft guidance and then it made a change, and it changed this requirement to a recommendation. So it said, we're not going to require schools that they can't teach sex education below the age of 9, but we're going to recommend the minimum age for introducing sex education should not be the age of 9. So we don't believe this is a good thing. This is not a positive change, but nonetheless, it's a change that schools are going to be following. Now, even though it's a recommendation, we will still argue that parents should approach schools and say, because the Department of Education has recommended that schools do not teach sex education below the minimum age of 9, that we suggest that you also follow this DFE recommendation. Now, obviously, we said there's a right to withdraw in primary schools and the right to withdraw in secondary schools, which we've already covered. One change that's going to happen from September 2026 is that children will be taught the names of sexual body parts from in primary schools. Now, although the guidance hasn't specified when this starts, which year groups this starts, it has to be taught by the end of primary school, and it's part of statutory health education, which is a new requirement that was brought in through the changes from 2020 onwards. Now, before this, schools were teaching the names of sexual body parts as an interpretation of the curriculum. There's a requirement in the current requirements in primary school that schools should allow children to know the language which safeguards them from child abuse. as part of a safeguarding requirement. Now, schools were teaching this as an interpretation of the curriculum. From next year, it's going to be a requirement. Now, what we say is that when we approach schools, we should say to schools that they should realize that although that's going to be a requirement from in primary schools, there is no requirement to teach this in year 1 or year 2 or year 3 or year 4 or 5 or 6. But a school can decide to teach it at any point before the end of primary school. So we should say we don't believe it's appropriate for children to be taught this in year 1 or year 2. Neither is the government requiring that children teach this, are taught this from year 1 or year 2, but they should be taught in later year groups. So your engagement with schools should be to get schools to teach this in a later year group rather than a earlier year group. Now, going on to answering questions, the guidance for teachers in answering questions. For example, if a child asked in year 2 about pornography, for example, now it's not appropriate for a teacher to answer questions about pornography in terms of the whole school, because that's not a requirement that's taught in primary schools to talk about pornography, for example. And so the new guidance says that there needs to be greater clarity. Policies in schools should provide greater clarity to schools, to teachers in answering questions that go beyond the statutory content. And so teachers should be given guidance. So, for example, some policies at the moment say if a child asks a question that goes beyond what should be taught in this year group, then maybe that child should be taken outside the class and that question should be answered on a one-to-one basis. Or maybe further guidance should be sought from a senior leadership member in the team, in the school, for example, a deputy head or head of year, or maybe the head teacher, or maybe the parents of that child should be brought in and that question discussed and answered in a way in line with parents' wishes. So there's different approaches that schools should take. But what we should ensure when we're talking about changing the policies of a school, we should ensure that there's clear guidance on how a school answers these questions, or how a teacher answers these questions that go beyond the requirements at that particular level. There's a requirement to consult. We mentioned before that before the new guidance, before the new policy is reviewed. Now, a policy is typically reviewed either every year, 2 years, or every 3 years. Now, the government doesn't say that the policy has to be reviewed every year or 2 years or every 3 years, but a school can decide the frequency of review. But they have to review it at least every 3 years. So the policy, if you look at the policy of your child's school, and you can download that from the website, it will tell you how often the policy is reviewed. And so you can look at the policy and it will tell you when the policy was last reviewed, and it'll be on the front page of the policy. When the policy was last reviewed, when the policy will be next reviewed, and inside the policy, it will tell you how often the policy is reviewed. Now, the point here is that schools have to consult you before the policy is finalized. And so as part of that review process, schools have to consult with parents. Now, although the guidance doesn't say what that policy review what that policy process involves, how parents are consulted, nonetheless, we should, as part of our process of interaction with the school, inform schools that we would like to be part of that such review process, and we'd like to be an active part of that process. We're going to talk about this later when we talk about the action section, but it's really important that you know that schools must consult you. Most schools don't consult you at the moment. The RSE policy must be a clearer document than it is. We've looked at, last year I wrote a report called Could Do Better, which we sent to all MPs and Department of Education. And we looked at 200 policies across 33 cities in the country. And most policies don't tell you very much. They're carbon copies of each other. So if there's a local authority that produces a policy, a model policy, those schools tend to adopt that policy. And most schools don't really add anything more than what's already existent within the model policy. So our target, our goal is to make the policy much more effective and meaningful. And the way to do that is to engage in that policy review process, which we're going to talk about a little later. But I think the point being is that RSE policy is a legal document that the school has that it must follow. So if the policy, for example, says that if a child asks a question that goes beyond the statutory content in that year group, they should then seek advice from a senior leader in that school, or they should involve the parents in answering that question, or they should answer that question one-to-one with that child. Then the teacher is legally obliged to follow that policy. The training then of the teachers in that school has to then change in relation to what's in the policy. So the policy is really important. The policy of a school changes the practice of the school. So our objective is to change the policy of the school. Schools also must, in the past, when external organizations would come into the school and they would deliver sessions, a lot of the times schools would not ask for a lesson plan or something which showed what the external organization would cover in that session. Now, schools must seek a lesson plan and materials in advance of that session, and parents must be able to view those lesson plans and the materials that are going to be used. So then we can then look at what is going to be taught to our children and make representation to the school to say what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Now, the problem is that when external organizations come into the school, that's when most of the problems happen. Most of the controversies happen around external organizations. So an external organization will come into the school and will be tasked to speaking about mental health, for example, but then that person who's delivering that session will say, look, I'm a Muslim and I'm also identify as gay, and there's nothing wrong in being Muslim and gay. And in the Quran, there's nothing that prohibits same-sex sexual relationships. And they'll say all sorts of strange things that go beyond what they're tasked to speak about. And so this new guidance very clearly states that the lesson plan and what the lesson plan and resources have to be submitted to the school before the session happens. And also parents need to be informed of this, and they'll need to be accessible to parents as well. The issue about LGBTQ is really important to note, and most parents don't know this, but primary schools are not required to teach about same-sex relationships in primary schools when talking about different families, for example. It's really important that that we understand this, and that schools know we understand it. Schools will often say we have to teach this. This is statutory, but it's not. Primary schools can decide not to teach about same-sex families when talking about different types of families. It's not a legal requirement to do so. But if a school decides to teach about same-sex families, then the school should know that we know that that's the choice of the school. That choice is not a statutory requirement. That choice is a decision that the school has taken when it has the choice not to teach this aspect. And then also what we've got to do is also ensure that that if a school does teach about same-sex families in their teaching, they do it in a factual way. So therefore, they can't just say, for example, that having two mums or two dads is the best relationship for everybody. No, that's the imposition of a particular values perspective about relationships, which is not the role of teachers. Teachers should be talking about some families are like this, some families are like that. Some people believe X, some people believe Y. They should talk about it in a very neutral way and not promote one particular family structure over another. Also, the new guidance says that things like gender ideology should not be promoted to children, because these are contested views. These are not views that are agreed science. And this idea that all people have a gender identity, that some children are born in the wrong body. A boy may be born in a girl's body, a girl's boy may be born in a boy's body. This is contested ideology. This is not accepted. So schools should not be promoting this to children. Also, schools should not be promoting this idea of social transition, that if a child says, look, I'm a girl, but I want to be a boy, okay, we'll call you by your male name, and we'll change your name on the register. We'll let you wear boys' uniform or whatever. This is not allowed. Or we'll let you use. You're a girl. You're a boy who wants to be a girl. We'll allow you to use the girls' changing rooms. We'll allow you to use the girls' toilets. This is not allowed now. This is in this new guidance. It's not allowed. I'm going to speak a bit about this later when we talk about the Supreme Court judgment. But this is like on page 74. So if we go to the document on page 74, you will see it will take me a while to get there, but on page 74, we've got an image here. Oops, I've gone. Yeah, so let's just go to page 74. Sorry. And I'll give you the link to downloading this later. But on page 74, you've got this image, and it just gives you your rights. And this is really important for parents to know. They've got a right to withdraw in primary schools and secondary schools from sex education classes. They've got the right to be consulted before the RSE policy is reviewed. They've got the right to view all the resources and feedback on the resources to schools. They've got the right to raise questions and concerns, and the right to be listened to. So this is a very brief outline. Now, really, what's important on page 32, there's this image here, and this is really important for parents to understand. There are two. When the government initially made this subject statutory, they placed two areas of flexibility so that schools can tailor the way they're teaching the subject in line with the school community that's in front of them. So two areas of flexibility that schools have is one is the how of teaching, and the other is the when of teaching. The how involves the choice of teaching materials, the way the school teaches them, the delivery methods, the lesson framing. All of these are choices that a school makes. The only thing that is required for a school to do is to teach the topics that the school is required to teach, and I'll explain what these are later because we've included this in the toolkit. But the only thing that a school needs to do is to teach the primary school requirements and the secondary school requirements, the topics and the learning outcomes. They're not required to teach particular resources. No resources are statutory. So what that means is that if a school buys in certain resources, now if a school decides to teach a particular topic with a particular resource, the resource isn't required, the topic is required to teach. And the topics are not that problematic. But the problem is when the school uses particular resources to teach that topic, that's when the problems occur. So you can say to a school, this resource is inappropriate for our children. I want you to replace it with something else. Yeah. Now, a school can't say, oh, this is statutory. What is statutory is the requirements, which we're going to go through in a little while. It's not the resources. So the school can adapt resources, can change resources, can eliminate certain resources that come into the school, and that's absolutely fine. And you can ensure the school utilizes that flexibility. The second area of flexibility that school has is when a school teaches particular resources. When we look at the requirements later, you will see that it has the topics and the learning outcomes for underneath these topics, but then it doesn't have the year groups attached to these topics. It doesn't say this needs to be taught in year 1 or year 2, or this should be taught in year 7 or year 8. Rather, it says by the end of primary school, by the end of secondary school, all of these need to be taught. This is really important for us to understand because that means that a school can decide when it says, we want to teach it in year 1, and parents say, no, it's not appropriate in year 1, the school can say, okay, we'll teach it in year 3 or year 4. There's no requirement to teach it in any particular year group, which means there's flexibility and negotiation in when they teach it. These are 4 areas that we are concerned about in terms of RSE teaching. And there are 4 things that really you need to focus upon. One is the teaching of sexual body parts. We said that even though next year it's going to be a requirement in schools in health education, but it has to be taught by the end of primary school. It can be taught in year 3 or year 4 or year 5. Try and get schools to teach it in a later year group. Because why should a year 1 pupil who's 5 or 6, why should that year 1 pupil be taught the names of body parts like penis, vagina, vulva, anus, scrotum? These is inappropriate for children to learn these things. And we should say to the school, look, if a child knows this vocabulary, they type it into Google, that can take them to pornographic websites, for example. That could be a safeguarding risk. So and there's a way of teaching children to be safe from abuse without having to name the body parts. The NSPCC resource initially, when it was created, didn't include the names of body parts, and it kept children safe from abuse. It's not a requirement to teach children the names of body parts to keep them safe from abuse. Another thing is teaching about same-sex families. We said it's not required in primary schools, so you can either get a school not to teach it in primary schools, but when a school decides to teach it, then that teaching should be factual and not promote different perspectives or different types of families as well. Also, the issue of sometimes schools will teach the sexual content in relationship education. Now, we said in sex education classes, you can withdraw, but for example, in primary school, if a school is deciding to teach sex education and relationship education, this is not allowed. Sometimes schools do that. We need to be very clear to schools that you need to separate the sex education content and the relationship education content. Even in secondary schools, there's sex education content and relationship education content. You can withdraw from the sex education element of RSE, but not from relationship education. So if a school decides to teach the sex education elements in relationship education, that creates a problem for us as well. And then also there's the idea, there's some resources, there's like a jigsaw resource, which is quite popular in schools. It uses, for example, this idea of gender stereotypes in year 3. And when it talks about gender stereotypes, then it starts to talk about transgenderism. So we need to make sure that schools don't teach more than the statutory requirements. Like, this is one area that schools sometimes do, because the materials that a school has purchased from, for example, from Jigsaw, starts talking about transgenderism. But if it does, then a school shouldn't teach that aspect, should not go beyond gender stereotypes, a module that is required in relationships education. Now, I want to refer you to we said, for example, that a school has to teach the statutory requirements in year 1 and year 2. Yeah. And so here we've created the primary school requirements, secondary school requirements. There's been some changes since the 2019 guidance. There's been some additions to this in the new guidance, and we've included that within the toolkit, which you can look at. But what we've done is, look, we said before that the schools are not required to teach things in different year groups, but it says pupils should know by the end of primary school, and then it's got in bold primary families and people who care about me, which is the topic area, and then the learning outcomes underneath it, which are numbered. And at the end of that, we've got our comments. Our comment section we gives you some comments about different aspects that you can read when you download the toolkit. So it's got it's got our comments at the end of each of these sections, so you can look at all of the requirements in primary schools. Now, the primary school requirements aren't that problematic, really, generally, but it's how they're taught. Remember, we talked about the materials that a school uses to teach these things. So you've got here on page 46 onwards, you've got secondary school requirements as well. Now, the secondary school requirements, as I said, the sex education elements of this you can withdraw from, but there's also got our comments, and our comments covers some things that you can talk to your children about when schools cover this. But what we say is, when you withdraw your children from primary school sex education or secondary school sex education, you should also say to the school, I want to know what you're teaching in different elements of different year groups, so that I can discuss this with my own children. Because just by withdrawing your children doesn't safeguard them, but we have a responsibility to ensure our children are taught these things from our values perspectives, and we have an open conversation with our children about these things, because they're going to learn about some of these things either from other children in their class, or what they see on television, or what they see in society. And so we've got to also bear that in mind. And we've got template letters on our website, which I'll refer you back to in a little while. We've got template letters that you can utilize in terms of for withdrawing and for other functions that you want to do to engage schools. So I'll refer you back to that when we get to that section. But I won't cover this. I won't cover the primary school guidance. You can look at this in your own time. If you've got any questions, please do let me know. But what next thing I want to focus on is, now we really know what's statutory, what's not statutory, what schools got flexibility over, and what schools don't have flexibility over. We've created like 3 tiers of actions for schools. And to help you to navigate this, I'm going to go to the actual toolkit, so you can see this, see the sections in that. and that's on page 76. So let's go to page 76. It's going to take a bit of time for you to scroll, but these actions are taking into account your whatever time you have to commit to making changes in schools. We've created like 3 levels of actions. Yeah, 3 levels of action that you can do to engage in your child's school. So we've got 3 levels of actions. The first level action is protector, and the second level of action is guide, and the third level of action is advocate. Now, protector is about withdrawing your child. Guide is about asking key questions to get a school to think about why it's teaching this in the way it's teaching it, how it's come to the decision to teach these things in the way that it is teaching it, and is there a way of teaching it in an alternative way? And an advocate is the highest level of action. It's an action that helps the school to enables us to take part in a process to change the policy. And as I said, policy changes practice in a school. So if you change the policy, you change the practice in a school. So these 3, we've got like a little easy way of approaching this. So you look at, if you've got very little time, you do protector. You've got a bit more time, guide, and then advocate. So it just helps you to understand whether your time commitment allows you to do different actions out. Everybody should be protector. Every Muslim parent should withdraw their children from sex education classes. We said in primary schools and secondary schools, you can withdraw. We've got template letters on our website, which I'm going to refer you to a little later. But that's a simple action. Now, if you withdraw one time, if you are in your child is in year 1 and you withdraw them in year 1, that withdrawal lasts until year 6. If you are if your child is in year 7 in a secondary school and you withdraw your child in year 7, that withdrawal lasts until year 10. And we said when your child turns 15, then they have the right to decide whether they're withdrawn or not, but it lasts until that point. So you only need to withdraw once. When your child is withdrawn, then they are either placed in another class while that session is taking place, or they are placed, given extra work that is outside of that class. And so they're not in that particular sex education class. They're actually physically withdrawn. The school has to provide some alternative for your child during that time. The second tier of action is guide. We realize that, when lots of schools, when they decide on things, they usually just adopt what other schools are doing, and they don't really think about why they're doing it in a particular way. And so what we found is that by asking questions to the school, that forces the school to rethink their practice in a way that never thought about before. And when you ask a question, they'll go back and say, yeah, why are we doing this in this way? And that's a really important question that forces the school to rethink their practice, because then they start to think about, is there a way we can teach this in a different way? Can we change this? Can we modify this? Now, we've got question banks for primary schools and secondary schools. We've got a list of questions. Now, we've got quite a few questions for primary schools and secondary schools. Now, we're saying to you is choose 5 questions that go into all of these sections. There's 5 sections. Maybe choose 1 question from each section. Or you want to choose 2 questions from 1 section, that's fine. If you want to ask 6 questions, that's not a problem. But don't ask all of them. Yeah, pick and choose your questions based upon the types of areas that you're concerned about in the school. If you're concerned more about gender identity and social transitioning in school, ask more questions about that. If you're more concerned about how a school takes into account the religious background of your child, ask a question about that. But just don't ask all of the questions, pick and choose the questions. Now, we've got template letters on our website that have all of the questions for primary schools and another template letter for all the questions in secondary schools. You can just delete the questions you don't want to ask and keep the questions you want to ask, and you can send it to school. So we try to make it as easy for you to interact with schools as possible. And we've got other template letters that I'm going to explain a little later. So we've got these question banks. Now, the third tier of activity in school is advocate. This is for you as parents to change the policy. We said, changing the policy, you change the practice. So what you do is you get the policy of your school, you can download it from school, you can go to the school office and ask them for a copy. Look at the policy, contact the school and ask to be involved in the review process. We said schools must include parents in the review process before the policy is reviewed. Now, we're saying also that even though here we're saying 4 to 6 months before the policy date is the policy review date, you contact the school. But over the next year, every single school in the country will be reviewing the RSA policy because of new guidance. So it's really important approach your school now. We're just about to put a letter, a template letter on the website to ask for you to do that. Send it to the school to say, look, I want to be part of the review process. I know that you have to include parents. We know that you're going to review the policy this year, so please include me in this policy review process. Please tell me what the timelines of the review process will be and how I can be involved. And then approach the school about that. Send a template letter to be involved in that. Now we've got a template checklist that is here that enables you to ask to look at the policy of the school and to say, okay, the right to withdraw. So you look at the policy and you say, does the policy clearly state the right to withdraw from sex education at both primary and secondary levels? Now, if it's a primary school one, you only need to worry about the primary school withdrawal. If it doesn't, if the policy doesn't include anything about withdrawal, so if you download it, for example, an easy way of doing this is download the policy onto your computer. And for example, use Adobe Acrobat Reader, for example, and then you could do a find search. You can go Control F, and then you can type in withdraw. And if the word withdraw doesn't even exist in the toolkit, that means that's something that's missing. So you leave this checklist blank. Even if it says withdraw and it doesn't have a clear statement for what parents can withdraw from, then keep it blank, yeah. But does it specify which parts of RSE can be withdrawn from? Keep it blank, yeah. Does it explain how to request withdrawal? If that's not clear, leave that blank, yeah. So now when you complete this checklist based upon your child's school's policy, you can see the gaps in the policy. The things that are not ticked, you can use as part of the review process to say, look, these are the things that are missing from the policy. Now, this enables you then to engage with schools on that. There's some notes on reviewing using that checklist here, and also we've got some policy examples as well. These examples are from schools which when we were looking at the RSE policies across the country, we took snippets of policies which we found were quite good, yeah, and we've included them in here. You can look at them, and if you, for example, say to schools, look, we don't really have any clear statement about talking about sensitive and controversial issues. This Hare Hills Primary School in Leeds has really good statement on sensitive and controversial issues. Maybe we should think about including that in our policy. And you can look at different policy excerpts. We've also got two examples of policies that are really good. Thomas Gambier Primary School here, and then also Seven Kings School here, which is a primary and secondary school. Thomas Gambier is a primary school, and Seven Kings School is a primary and secondary school. There are two exemplary policies. Now, this doesn't mean that the school is teaching RSE in a very good way, but the policies are very good. So you can refer the school to these policies as best practice documents. The reason why we're using these best practice examples is if you go to a school and as part of the review process and say, look, this policy needs to be changed, it's missing these things. The school say, okay, if you come up with a policy alternative, a statement that should be in the policy, school say, oh, that's good. But if you say this is from a policy in Rochdale or from Leeds or from Bradford, and this is a really good policy statement, the school will be more receptive to including that in the policy because it comes to another school, and schools like to include best practice when they're teaching this subject. Now, so we talked about policy examples. Now we've got a section at the end on page 101, 109 to 114 for Muslim teachers working in schools, Muslim governors and imams and community leaders. If you've got contact with Muslim teachers and governors, please refer them to these sections. We've also had webinars for these particular sections. We found it difficult to engage Muslim governors. So if you've got any ideas of engaging Muslim governors, please feel free to get in contact with us. We've had lots of webinars as well, and yes, on Friday we had a national khutbah day on RSE where we've got in our toolkit we've got a khutbah template which we asked on Friday for all imams to cover in their khutbahs. So let me just here, this is the khutbah template, and we asked all khatibs to tackle this in their khutbah on Friday because we want to raise further awareness amongst parents and get parents to engage in action. So lots of imams did. We're saying to imams, that even if you haven't taken part in the National Khutbah Day, which was on Friday, you can still deliver this khutbah on any Friday in the coming weeks. So please do encourage your masajid, your imams, to cover this khutbah. It's quite a detailed khutbah that enables them to raise awareness amongst parents. And we, as part of that khutbah, we also have we are we created a poster which imams can put up in their masjid after the khutbah with a QR code where parents can then take that QR code, and it takes them to the toolkit which they can download, and they complete their name and email address, and it gets sent to them via email for them to download. So please enable us to approach imams locally to you to take part in that khutbah. Even if they didn't take part in Friday's National Khutbah Day, they can still do that in the coming weeks, inshallah. So this is really the end of the presentation. This is one of 11 toolkits that we're creating. The next toolkit that we just finalized the draft, and we're getting sent out there to people to review, which is one about discovering divine purpose. One of the problems is children don't know what their purpose is in life, or they're just Muslim really because their parents are Muslim and they're culturally accepted Islam, but not fully understood what Islam as the truth means. And living in a society which is very secular, atheistic, where children are being taught, why do you need to follow these particular rules? And they can't, they don't know why they're following particular rules because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it. And who is Allah to them? And they don't understand Allah as the creator, Allah as the one who defines good and bad. Then we create this toolkit to support parents to have discussions with their children around developing purpose in their children. It's quite a comprehensive toolkit. We're quite pleased with it. We're getting it out there for review. Please do look out for that. Hopefully that will be released in October or November, depending upon when we can get it finalized, but it'll be out very soon. And we've got other toolkits coming, which is about developing emotional strength in your children, about social media, helping your child navigate social media, helping your child to safeguard himself from child abuse, helping your child to say no to pornography, one on LGBTQ, one on sexual relationships, one on the importance of fathers in raising children, one on different ideas of gender war, or the battle of sexes that exist in society, which is feminism and red pill culture, both extremes that we need to safeguard our children from. And then the other one is on helping your children to develop a critical thinking mindset. So we've got these toolkits that we're coming out over the next 2 years. You can sign up for updates on using this QR code, or on our website. You can sign up for the newsletter, for example. You can support our work. We've done different we did a tour nationally. The next one is going to be in Huddersfield on the 11th of October. We've added an additional date. We're going to have one in South London. If you want one in your local area, please you can help us organize one in your local area. We're not going to do too many now because we've done quite a few already. But if you want one specifically in your area, we haven't done one in your area so far. For example, you live in an area that is other than these areas, then we'll be happy to look at having one in your vicinity. And that's really the toolkit per se. What I want to do is just to I want to refer you to this particular website, which is where we are keeping all the templates. So I'm just going to show you this very briefly because it's going to be very useful for you. This is, for example, here on this webpage, you can download the toolkit. Yeah. So this is muslimfamilynitiative.org/RSE toolkit. When you download the toolkit, you will come across some of these pages, and you have this QR code on page 137. That will take you to this particular page. So you can download the toolkit. You can download the khutbah template. So, for example, if I click on here, this is a downloadable version of the khutbah template, which is in a much more easily accessible form than in the actual toolkit. So you can print this out and give it to your imam. And also you've got like this poster, which I was referring you to. After the khutbah, you can have the imam or the masjid put these little posters up, which then has a QR code where people can access and download the toolkit. So here we've talked about, action for projectors. We said there's a primary school withdrawal letter, a secondary school withdrawal letter, which is in Word, which just all you have to do is download this um, this um, um, uh, this uh, uh, this withdrawal letter. It will you can see it's in Word, and the red bits are just things you need to change with your details. But it's a fully accessible Word document, a template that you can change according to your needs. There's a letter to request teaching materials, to look at the teaching materials in a school. There's a letter here, a primary letter that includes all the questions for primary schools. There's one for secondary schools. There's a letter to be involved in the RSE review process for primary schools, for secondary schools. There's a template letter to ask about whether the school teaches LGBTQ topics and how they teach it. There's a template letter to asking about external organizations. If there is a template you'd like on this page, then you can also complete a form with your details saying, I want a template letter that covers this particular area. And then we will, inshallah, create a template letter. We want to create all sorts of support for parents to be able to make meaningful change in schools. So please let us know what your needs are, and we will help you. I'm just going to go through the chat box to see what questions people have asked now that we've ended the actual presentation per se. Can we have access to the PowerPoint? Yes, you can. Nobody has actually asked us to date for access to the PowerPoint, but I can send you a PDF of the PowerPoint. What you can do is if you've got my email address, my email address is is on the PowerPoint here. So Yusuf@MuslimFamilyInitiative.org. So you can email me, or if you've got my WhatsApp number or whatever, you can contact me by WhatsApp, email, WhatsApp, or text message. Just contact me, and I can send you a copy of the slides if that's what you want. Nobody has actually. It's really strange that nobody's actually ever asked me for a copy of the slides. But if you want it, then I'm happy to provide it to you, inshallah. Is there a way of getting this recording as well? Yeah, inshallah. This particular session has been created to create a recording for our website. So so hopefully tomorrow I'll put it on the website. It will be, so if you go to Muslim Family Initiative, just so that you know where it will be, you go to muslimfamilyinitiative.org, and then you go at the top of under the resources section. So let me just move this resources section under videos. Yeah. So you go to the videos section, and then you will find all the videos. It's not showing up at the moment. I'm not sure why that's showing up like this. It's usually it's clear, but it'll be on this section. I'm not sure what's happened to the video section actually, but let me just do that again. See, but basically it'll be on this particular section. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happened to that. Let me have a look at that later. But it'll be in that particular section. So the recording will be there. Actually, let me see. Actually, maybe there's another section. Yeah, I don't know what's happened to the section, but I'll have a look at this later and see what's gone wrong. But yeah, how do I deal with my child's school as they decided to introduce teaching the names of body parts in year 3? Also, they mentioned that it's mandatory to attend those classes. That it has to be mandated by the government. A straight no withdrawal option has been sent. Now the thing is, anything that's taught in relationships education in the school, yeah, is not, you can't withdraw from. You can only withdraw from the sex education elements in primary school, but not the relationship education elements. But if a school says teaching name of body parts is mandatory in year 3, ask the school, can you tell me where it says that is mandatory in year 3? And there's nowhere it says it. It says it has to be taught by the end of primary school. So that you can say to the school, you're absolutely right. It is mandatory in primary schools, but it's not mandatory in any particular year group. Tell me where it's mandatory in year 3. And there's nothing which says, but the government hasn't said, the Department of Education hasn't said it's mandatory in year 3. How can I access the toolkit, the booklet? So I've mentioned that you can go to this website. So what I'll do is I will put it in the chat box. Yeah, so if you look at the this RSE page, I'll just go to this and I'll just copy it into the chat box. So this is the website muslimfamilyinitiative.org/RSE toolkit to access. But obviously, it's a long link, but I'll put it in the chat box and then you can access it there. Yeah, so you can easily access it there, inshallah. Can we have a link to the website, please? Yeah, so muslimfamilyinitiative.org. I put the link in the chat box anyway, the link to the toolkit, and then you just have to delete the end bit. Muslimfamilyinitiative.org is our website. We need the website link, or can we keep still so we can? Yeah. So if you download, yeah. So so somebody's already put the link there anyway. So that's the link to the website anyway. Excellent. Yeah. Very useful, informative. Jazakallah khair for coming. Okay, that's fine. So are there any other questions? As I said, hopefully, inshallah, we'll put this link on our website tomorrow. If you want to, just send me an email or WhatsApp message, and I will let you know once the actual recording is up. So either you can come onto the website or you can just send me a quick message, and I'll let you know when the recording is up. But are there any other questions? And obviously, feel free to contact me if you've got any additional questions much later on. Email is probably best. WhatsApp is probably second best, but email, I'll get to emails, inshallah, and answer anything you have. But if there's any other questions, then please do feel free to email me afterwards. But really, what I say to you is, look, it's a responsibility. We have a responsibility to safeguard our children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Oh, you believe, protect yourselves and your family from the hellfire. Raising our children in line with our values is not just an add-on, something that's good if we want to do it. It's a responsibility for which all of us will be answerable for on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allah will question us, how did you fulfill the responsibility? We blessed you with children. We gave you your children as amana, as a trust and a responsibility. How did you fulfill that trust? If we take steps in schools as one of many actions, as well, I'm not saying these are the only actions, but one of many actions, if we safeguard our children from these things in schools and take actions in schools, even if we can't change everything, we can change some things, then we'll stand from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and have some excuse for ourselves that we've done something, we tried our best. Think of it, this is our responsibility as Muslim parents to our children, that Allah has blessed us with this responsibility. How are we fulfilling that responsibility? Also, what I'd say to you is, if you are able to help other people to spread the message beyond this webinar, then please do so. One of the ways in which to do that is contact your local imam of your masjid and say, look, they're teaching some really things in schools which are harmful to our children's iman. Please help us to spread this awareness. We've got this template document. Please do complete it, and please do deliver it on a Friday. Help parents to change these things in schools. Help us to spread the awareness far and wide. Please do so, and please, if you have the opportunity and a chance to do so, this whole project cost us about £8,000 in designing and printing these toolkits and creating these resources for parents, and in doing we want to do also additional resources on our website. We've got a donate link. Obviously, you don't have to give £100. You can give £10 or whatever. But one thing that's really important, if you can give £10 or £5 a month, just click on this link, make this donation every month. If you can give us £5 or £10 a month, this will help us a lot in help in fulfilling these resources, in creating these resources, and helping more parents like you. So please do support us in this if you can. And if you can't, please make dua for us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us successful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us to fulfill our responsibility to support our community. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses this work and accepts it from us. So whatever you can, support us either through your donations or dua, or if you can donate and make dua, then that will be great for us, and we'll be really grateful for that. Jazakum khair. But I see there's no more questions. But I said, please do contact me if you have any questions. Back to this page, there's our website address. An easy way of accessing the website, rather than writing muslimfamilyinitiative.org, you type in www.protectyourmuslim.family. It'll get to our website as well. So this is an easy way of getting to our website without typing the whole of the message. So this is Jazakum khairan for your help and support. Please do remember us in your du'as. Please donate. Please spread the word outside of here. And please do take action in schools to protect your children. Jazakum Allah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.